Ali, welcome. This is my friend, Ali Noorani. Ali is the executive director of the National Immigration Forum and newly titled president, aren't you? I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Giving you these titles. What are we doing? Ali is going to finish us up today, and I will turn it over to him, and then we'll have a little question and answer toward the end as well. But I'll turn it over to my friend, Ali Noorani.
Hey, great. Well, thank you, Christy, and hope everybody is doing well. And I want to apologize in advance because I'm really bad at the Zoom. But you would think that by now I would have gotten a little bit better at this. But again, first of all, thank you to Christy for organizing this incredibly important conversation for leaders from across the state of Ohio. And really thank you everybody for gathering. It's from what I've heard, has been just a great set of conversations. And I know that all of us as the National Immigration Forum are really, really looking forward to continuing to work with everybody in the state of Ohio. So I wanted to kind of share some thoughts on kind of where we are right now, but then lay out kind of our thinking in terms of where we go moving forward, irrespective of what happens with the election. So the thing is that there are moments in human history where the world shrinks, where it feels like lines on paper become a map that defines our worldview. When information, goods, money cross those lines, when, frankly, immigration blurs those lines. So the challenge for us is that as the movement of people feels closer, how do we as a nation not recoil from this movement, whether it's economically, politically, or even the policies that we create? So for us as advocates, whether we're in Ohio or anywhere in the country, how we understand and react to the moment that we're living through, driven by the migration of people, will come to define the United States for generations to come. Unless we as a community and as a country realize that all of us are humans to be treated with dignity. And that at this moment, my fear, and I think all of our fear, is that we're going to fail to live up to this challenge. I think we all know this if we work with refugees who are resettling in Ohio or with immigrants who are coming to the state to contribute to the range of industries in the state, that when a migrant leaves their home, they leave with a sense of dignity. They don't want to leave necessarily. In fact, for many refugees, they bring their house keys with them, and they hope to one day return. And they hope for a better life. And as a result, they go to incredible lengths to reach the United States in order to keep their families safe. But when they arrive, the United States immigration system, which is designed, in my opinion, to be tough, to be mean, to be strong, our system presumes their guilt. Our immigration system uses antiquated tools to control modern migration, and we force migrants to wait in refugee camps around the world. We take their children away. We detain them and their families. And even if they came here legally through a work visa or a family visa, we demand that as they go through the process, that they pass a wealth test. So we as a nation, I think at our core, have come to believe that immigrants don't have the ability to live up to their God-given potential. And for us as a country and as advocates who care about these issues and communities, how do we once again understand that all of us can live up to our potential, whether we were born here or not? But as a result of the policies and the rhetoric that we're faced with, the dignity of people trying to find safety, grace, and a brighter future is stripped away by one of the wealthiest and most powerful nations in the world, that is the United States. And along the way, I would argue that our own nation's moral and economic standing in the world is weakened. Our populism undermines our democracy, and the American people, the American idea, loses its moral standing in the world. And all this happens in large part, I think, because the speed and clarity of what is broadcast to our phones, again, has shrunk our world. And for many of us or our neighbors or our communities, when we see the photo of the nameless child on the train from Honduras or the anonymous family on a raft in the Mediterranean, we believe that they will be our mysterious neighbors next week. And we're led to believe that. The stories that we hear, the stories that we're told in so many ways lead us to believe that this will happen. So as a result, global migration is challenging the way that we see each other and the way that we see America. So we get scared. We think that we're going to be, ultimately refugees in our own nation, and we look to create obstacles, both physical, political, and emotional, in order to preserve our way of life. So we become more nationalistic and more individualistic. But soon, whether it's a city, as a town, a state, or as a country, we realize that change can be slowed, but it can't be stopped, which just scares us as a country even more. So we harden our rhetoric, we build walls, we pass new laws, all in an effort to exert greater control over a world that seems uncontrollable. Now, as you all know, through the work that you do every single day, it doesn't mean that Americans are not compassionate. We don't want people to die at the hands of their tormentors. We don't want children to go hungry. So in our churches, at our dinner tables, we take individual acts of compassion and grace. And through these acts of service, relationships are developed that put a name on the nameless migrant. And we begin to see our stories in their stories. But the global pressure of migration, the sense of things being out of control, leads us to believe, or leads us to not trust our systems. And we remain fearful of the people we don't know. And we tell US citizens who look or sound different to go back where they came from. So at the end of the day, for so many of us, we don't think that the system works for us, so why should it work for them? The heart of our challenge lies in the fact that our individual choices are driven by compassion, but our fear of the other leads us to build an immigration system that is harsh and that is unforgiving. The cultural bridges that are necessary to overcome this gap are the challenge that face all of us in this meeting today and in the work that we do. These days, more than ever, the moral conflict of our immigration system just won't be solved by our national politics. I think there's probably, we could, all agree to that. The answers are going to lie in the small towns and the cities across the nation, and frankly, across Ohio, where the dignity of immigrants and ultimately of America is being restored. These are the communities that are bringing light to an America that can be both a nation of laws and a nation of grace. These are the communities, this is your work that is striving to find this balance. But finding this balance is tougher than I think we've ever imagined, we've ever seen. So I want to start or continue here and go back to 2015. So in 2015, there was a presidential candidate that launched his campaign with these words: I am certain that we can make the decades just ahead the greatest time ever to be alive in this world. Now, this is an optimistic, a hopeful vision that took on challenges, created solutions, and brought the nation together. And I should say that this was a Republican presidential candidate. Now, 2015 feels like it was a long time ago. And regardless of who we voted for in 2016 or who we're going to vote for in 2020, it's hard to be that optimistic. So a friend of mine recently wrote, who actually worked for this candidate back then, he wrote that, quote, "It occurred to me sometime in the last few months that I'm not sure I believe that anymore. There's just a sense that something has shifted, that we've crossed a threshold and maybe our best days are actually behind us." Well, I take my friend's sense of foreboding about the recent history of the last few months, and I raise it with a quick snapshot of all things challenging in immigration since the last election. Just a snapshot. Thousands of children separated from their parents, twice as many immigrant detainee deaths this fiscal year than last, a shutdown of our asylum system, thousands of unaccompanied children expelled from our country, many of whom have been held secretly in hotel rooms, refugee resettlement falling to historic lows, allegations of hysterectomies performed on detained immigrant women without their knowledge, increased deportation of undocumented immigrants who pose no public safety threat, a massive reduction in legal immigration, the El Paso massacre, elimination of temporary protected status for 400,000 immigrants, many of them who have been here for 20 years, approximately 300,000 legal immigrants unable to naturalize in time to vote, and finally, the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on immigrant communities and communities of color. So, as I told my friend, we didn't cross this threshold, at least in the immigration space, months ago. We crossed this threshold years ago, probably decades ago. But also over our nation's history, this is also a threshold that we've crossed before and that we've come off on the other side in a much better place. So let's go from 2015 all the way back to 1905. Between 1905 and 1914, according to Jia Yang's new book, One Mighty and Irresistible Tide, nearly 10 million immigrants arrived at our shores. And after a pause for World War I, the number picked up again. But this time, as she wrote, more noticeable than their numbers, though, was the appearance of these new immigrants, as some called them disdainfully. The more recent arrivals spoke Italian, Yiddish, Polish, Italian. She also described that after a period of dormancy at this moment in our history, the Ku Klux Klan was once again on the rise. And she wrote, this time with a virulent anti-immigrant core and millions of members gathering not in the shadows, but in broad daylight. In response to the changing demographics of immigration and the political firestorm that was being created, on May 26, 1924, President Coolidge, who had promised in his first annual message to Congress that, quote, America must be kept American, signed the Johnson-Reed Act into law, which in essence ended Asian immigration and dramatically reduced immigration from Southern Europe. Meanwhile, at this time, a political prisoner in Germany lamented the ease by which one could become a German citizen. Looking across the Atlantic, this political prisoner in Germany wrote, the American Union categorically refuses the immigration of physically unhealthy elements and simply excludes the immigration of certain races. That political prisoner was Adolf Hitler. Is this what awaits us on the other side of the threshold this time? Honestly, there are times when I'm not sure. There's so many unknowns. But also looking at history, and we'll talk about this looking forward, there are people and there are leaders to pull hope from. So in 1921, there was an individual, Emmanuel Cellar. Emmanuel Cellar was a son of Jewish immigrants from Germany. In 1921, Cellar was 35 years old, and in the first year of a congressional career representing Brooklyn, it spanned 50 years. Over time, as chair of the House Judiciary Committee, he fought for and passed, without personal fanfare, a raft of transformative legislation. Among these, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. But one of his first political fights, in fact, way back in 1921, was the one that stuck with him over the course of those 50 years. The fight for a just, humane immigration system. Because over those decades between 1921 and 1965, Cellar fought back against some of the darkest impulses of our nation to make the case for immigrants and immigration to the US. He fought against eugenics. He fought against outright racism. He fought against efforts to block refugees, Jewish refugees fleeing World War II to seek protection on our shores. These were the leaders whose local, and after decades of minor victories and major defeats in 1965, Congressman Cellar found victory when the Hart-Celler Immigration Act was signed into law by President Johnson. And President Johnson's formative immigration experiences came working as a teacher on the US-Mexico border, but also working as a congressional staffer, helping Jewish refugees find protection in the US. These were the leaders whose local experiences, bridging culture, fighting for the underserved, representing the best of their faith in their communities, that quite frankly went on to create the diverse, inclusive America that we live in today. And there were many more leaders, obviously, than Congressman Cellar or President Johnson who contributed to and played critical roles in all of these efforts over the course of time. But I think that because of the leadership that exists in, whether we're talking Ohio or Indiana or Iowa or South Carolina or Arizona, that I think that our best days are ahead of us. I don't think that what we've seen in the history and the high moments for the country when it comes to immigration are never going to be regained. I think that our best days are ahead of us. And in the difficulty of the moment, it is possible to see how things might change and how we might, or how we need to contribute to that change. So these days, in the context of COVID-19, for the first time in years, I believe that Americans have come to understand and appreciate the essential nature of the immigrant workforce in ways that we haven't in recent history. So, for example, I mean, just look at the data. Immigrants represent about 17% of the healthcare workforce overall. 24% of direct care workers, such as nursing, psychiatric, and home health care aides, are immigrants, and 28% of highly skilled professionals, such as physicians and surgeons, are foreign-born. Foreign-born workers make up 76% of all farm workers and 42% of all food packers. Overall, 22% of workers in the nation's food supply chain are immigrants. That's about 2.1 million workers who grow, harvest, process, and sell food in the United States. This data has become much more personal for Americans across the country as we respond and begin to recover to COVID-19. But the trick here is that, you know, we often want to talk about the data. All that data that I just laid out, it's kind of music to our ears, right? It just makes sense. But I think for folks who have concerns or fears about immigration or immigrants, the data, it doesn't tap into their values. So when we speak to our common values of patriotism, of hard work, of the American idea, of faith, then people who have questions and concerns, they begin to listen in a different way. So, for example, immigrants, when we say that immigrants are partners standing shoulder to shoulder with native-born Americans to help our economy recover and get us through this pandemic, when we explain the situation we face like this and the contributions of immigrations like this, there's a 25% increase in support for immigration to the US among conservatives. I should say 25% increase of support for immigrants in the US, but again, that's among conservatives. When we say that immigrants enrich our culture and are part of what makes America strong, and that we should not turn them away to other countries that compete with the US, this message leads to a 21% increase for immigrants, again, among conservatives. So what I'm trying to say here is that, yes, the data is important, but how we speak about the data and how we speak about contributions is actually much more important, because immigrants share our common values: human dignity, taking care of family, being hardworking, caring, and wanting to give back and contribute, and that they are grateful for their membership and contribution to the American idea. So the question for us as advocates and those who believe in the value of immigrants and immigration is, how do we affect policy change in the years ahead, you know, as we bring this particular gathering to a close? Well, I think our success begins with the narrative that we want to shape, the story that we need to tell, and most importantly, the audiences we must engage. Like I said, that, you know, growing numbers of Americans have come to believe that immigrants and immigration are contributing to the US, but we also have to understand that people do have fears. Those fears, I think, cut across cultural or economic or security factors. So how do we engage people in their fears, but do it in a constructive way? And think about, okay, you know, from a security perspective, the contributions of immigrants in terms of local law enforcement or serving in our armed forces. From an economic perspective, even in the context of high unemployment, how are immigrants, again, working shoulder to shoulder with the native born to help the country respond and recover? Or from a cultural perspective, how are immigrants contributing to the vitality of churches and schools and communities across the country? So trying to kind of flip those fears into opportunities that serve the interests of the American worker and their family. Second, I think that whether the work is at the district or the national level, how do we make sure that what we're doing, that we're doing everything we can to engage members of Congress in a strategic manner as possible? How do they know that congregants and consumers want change just as much as pastors, police chiefs, business owners? If we can strike that balance between the grass tops leadership that is engaging members directly and the grassroots activists who are making their voices heard at the polling booth, and then bringing their voices into that congressional office, then a member of Congress is realizing that it's not only the pastor, police chief, or business owner, but it's also the mother whose child is going to a local school, the person in that congregation, and really trying to achieve that balance. Third, I think we have to understand that as the economy continues to rebound, that the American worker and their family have experienced a generational shock as a result of COVID-19. For many of us, I know for us at the forum, we're tremendously grateful for the ability to continue to work and to be able to work at home. For too many of our fellow Americans, that's just not the reality. So as we're going through the economic recovery from COVID-19, being sensitive to those challenges, being sensitive to the stresses that people are facing on the ground and in their communities. And also making sure that we understand those stresses in terms of what they want to see for their own children and their children's future. And then finally, and this is potentially the most challenging, is that once COVID-19 passes, our borders are going to continue to be under tremendous pressure for migration. We've seen the stories and the pictures of poverty around the world that it's only increased because of COVID-19. So there's going to be an opportunity, if not a necessity, in the next administration, whether it's a second term for the Trump administration or a new administration, to reimagine what our immigration system needs to look like. And how does our immigration system serve and promote the values that we hold dear as Americans? Values of compassion, of hard work, of family. Because we can't throw our borders wide open, but we also have to realize that we've got to create a system that is acknowledging our economic and our social need as a country, but also the very real need of refugees, of asylum seekers, of folks who seek the protection and want to contribute to the United States, again, whether it's in Ohio or anywhere else in the country. So at the end of the day, why do I think that, our greatest days lie ahead of us? Because the fact is, hundreds of folks from Ohio spent a few hours thinking about these issues, talking about these issues. And I know that our work across the country with conservative and moderate leaders not just continues to occur, but continues to thrive and continues to grow. Because I think all of us, whether we are born here or are new to the nation, we want to see an America where all of us can live up to our greatest potential. So Christy, thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And I know all of us at the forum are tremendously grateful for your hard work.
Thank you so much, Ali. Really great to hear that message. We don't have any questions in the chat yet, so you might be off the hook. I'll wait a few minutes as we kind of close up and see if any more questions do come in. But just to close up for everyone listening, I like the idea of hope as we're moving forward in the future. We need that message of hope. And I think it's one that we all grab onto. For those of you who have been with us today, we hit our 200th registration yesterday, just before they closed. I can't believe you spent 3 hours on a Zoom call. Thank you. And I'm so grateful for all the Christian colleges that have messaged that you were having watch parties. So however many extra people who have not given me their email who are watching, really grateful for the time. To all of those who have spoken today, I'm so grateful for your expertise, your time, and contributing to this. And I would just like to encourage us as we move forward to take those words from Ali and to move forward on a hopeful message and to be thinking about how we can be a part of fixing the system together. I know one of the things that can happen with the kind of year that many of us have had is you feel a sense of hopelessness, but we don't have to be hopeless because we're not alone, we're together. And one of my biggest gratitudes being an American is living in a country where my voice matters, that I have the opportunity to speak and to vote and to tell elected officials what kind of a country I want to be in. And I'm just so grateful for those who are on this call who work for some of our elected officials' offices, that you guys listen to us and you guys hear us. And I think it's one of the most incredible things about our country. If we have no further questions, we have one question. Oh, here's a good one. So how different, good or bad, is the immigration system now over the last 3 years or so to how it was previously?
That is a big question. Well, I mean, first of all, I would
administrations that have ever been.
First of all, I highly recommend Jill Yang's book, Mighty and Irresistible Tide. She does an amazing job of kind of capturing the personalities, the politics, and the policies between 1921 and 1965. So look, I would say that as much as we want to improve our nation's immigration system, it's still easily the best immigration system, I think, in the world in terms of being able to kind of really try to pull together different, different needs across the economy. But, we also have to be honest that the last 3.5 years have been a real detriment to our nation's immigration system. We've seen, like I said earlier, a massive cut to legal immigration. Just before I got onto this, onto the conference, there was news that the administration would be limiting student visas to 2 years from practically every country from Africa. And I was talking to a national security expert, and she said there's no national security reason to be doing this. So, I think we've got a lot of work to do in the years ahead, whether it's in the next 4 years or 4 years after that, to kind of rebuild the nation's immigration system. And that's why I think we have to take this opportunity to reimagine it. So I wanted to invite everybody to join us the week of November 16th for our annual convening, Leading the Way, an American Approach to Immigration. And we're going to be having, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, a Democrat from California, joining Congressman Mike Simpson, a Republican from Idaho. We've got Russell Moore from the Southern Baptist Convention's Ethics and Religious Commission, joining Cherie Harder from the Trinity Forum. We've got a mayor from Bristol, United Kingdom, joining the mayor of El Paso, Texas. We've just got an amazing set of panels coming together. So you can go to our website, immigrationforum.org, and I'm sure that Christy will send you the information at least once, if not multiple times in the weeks ahead. So I look forward to kind of seeing everybody the week of November 16th.
And I have just put that link in the chat. Ali, you stole my last word, so I'm so glad you said that. We would love for you to join us. Thank you so much. I will follow up with an email. So for those who have been wondering, we are recording these, and we have wonderful people who are gonna put them in bite-sized chunks so you don't actually have to watch it 3 hours straight. But feel free to share these. For those who asked if you could show these with your law classes, with various disciplines that you are leading as a professor, yes, the answer is. For those who are pastors who've asked if you could speak with some of the pastors afterwards, or if they could come speak at your church, I'm sure that I could arrange that with some of them. So thank you so much for being here. You are all invited to Leading the Way. And I'm so grateful for your time, and I can speak on behalf of our whole team. It has been a joy to be with you here today.